Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Nectar.
Yes, sir. Adam Carroll. Today, we are talking about knowing your why when it comes to money. Now, why do you think that's important?
Well, the reason that comes to mind is without knowing your why, you might spend and invest in things that don't matter to you or aren't, life-giving to you, right?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Totally. One of the things that Adam and I recently did was we did a 3-day coaching program, and it was all around how to be a financial coach. And one of the first conversations we had was really about knowing why money is important to you. And it was awesome. There were about 41 people there, and we were able to really work with individuals. And what we're about to share really is the power of being able to know your why and how impactful that is. We were working with one gentleman, and I had asked him, why is money important to you? And he said, money's important because it pays the bills. And that's a very, very valid response, right? Like, that is absolutely true.
It's probably the most knee-jerk, gut-level reaction for most people, in all honesty.
Yeah. And so I said, great. Now, I went through a process, which I'll share with you later, but as we peeled the layer of the onion back and asked, why is that important to you and why is that important to you? What he ended up sharing was that, I think he had two or three kids, and one of them actually had, special needs or required some type of special treatment.
Yeah.
And so what we really got connected to and what he was able to share, which really completely moved the entire room, was that money's important because he wants to be able to give his daughter the best possible experience while she is alive and while she is here. And I believe she even is, do you remember how old she is?
She's 11.
Like 11. And she's 11 and she's like published books.
Right.
Like she has just been able to really experience life, and in many ways, opportunities that other people have not had.
Totally.
But it really was, the commitment to this gentleman that we were working with. That's why money's important. And there was feedback after that interaction, and there was a gentleman who said, if I knew that about him in terms of his why and why money is important, I would work 10 times harder for him.
Right.
And so it just gives me goosebumps because it's, not only does this clarity of purpose and knowing this gentleman's why provide clarity and vision, but it also creates an environment around him that would then be able to, increase wealth and, growth and expansion and all of that too. So it hits all levels. Yeah, knowing your why.
Yeah, it was such a cool conversation to have because ultimately why money was important and why work was important to he and his family. As I recall, the conversation was about because time was limited, they wanted to have the most amazing experiences and create memories. So work and money was about creating memories for their family, which you can imagine that might mean they go out to eat more or they take more trips or whatever. And maybe savings is put a little bit on the back burner, right? I remember kind of a follow-up to that conversation. He basically said, listen, this is why I do other things to make more money so that I can afford to go do these kind of fun things. So really, really cool story. Yeah. One of the other young ladies in the group had a situation where one of her parents had died somewhat prematurely, and they owned a family restaurant. Yet right before one of the parents passed away, they had cashed in their life insurance policy to help fund treatment and run the restaurant and so on and so forth. But what happened was it left them in sort of financial straits after the parent passed away because they had nothing to fall back on. And so for her, money had a completely different meaning. Her why was around time is fleeting, right? Which is obviously pretty explainable based on her situation. Yeah. But it was meant to plan for the future. So she had both kind of this like polar opposites going on. On one end, she wanted to have fun and be spontaneous. And on the other, she really wanted to be more of a planner and feel security and things like that. So when we started digging into what was her why, she started to unpack why both of those were important. And I think she's going to make some, fairly interesting changes.
Yeah, definitely. And to add on that, knowing your why allows us to then start asking questions around how we can have that happen.
Yes.
Because even though it is polar opposites, we can start to create a plan or start to take actions that say, okay, how do we address the need for security and planning, and
Yep.
how do we address the need for enjoying life because it is short.
Yep.
And then I think that, knowing your why, in a previous episode we were talking about working with a financial advisor or financial coach, but knowing your why will also provide the recommendation, the coaching, to be much more specific and tailored
Yep.
to you. Not everybody is different. My why is different from Adam's.
Totally.
And so being clear on what that is, you're able to communicate it and then essentially be better served or better serve other people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this whole idea of serving other people is central to understanding what your why is. When someone says, why is money important to you? And your, again, knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, I got some bills to pay.
Exactly like that.
That's not it, right? It is something that is higher than you is actually why money is important. So it could be that money is important because it allows you to express creativity in certain ways. It could be that it allows you to demonstrate to other people what's possible. One young lady in our coaching training said that money for her gave her independence, and the independence allowed her to show up for other people the way she needed to show up. Mm-hmm. So she had an experience where she had to take on a roommate, and the roommate was terrible. And she was feeling this lack of freedom and independence, having some money issues at the same time, and she wasn't showing up the way she needed to show up for her family and friends. And she said, she was the rock for her circle of friends, and so money was important to her because it allowed her to show up the way they needed her to show up. So we found that the why is really, it kind of relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah, 100%. And just for those of you who don't know, Maslow was a psychologist, I believe, who created a hierarchy of needs where people essentially first need, food and shelter, and then they need housing and security, a roof over their head, then a community, etc.
Yeah, connection.
And then essentially at the very tip of the pyramid is self-actualization, right? People fully reaching their fullest potential. Yeah. So oftentimes when we're having these conversations, one of the tells to know that we've arrived, or when people have really, gotten to the core of why money is important, is because it typically relates to other people